Welcome to Nightmare Lullabies. If you enjoy spine-chilling stories, don't forget to like and subscribe for more eerie tales. Let's dive into tonight's story. I've worked the overnight shift at our fast food chain for almost a year now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and most nights are uneventful. Just the occasional drunk customer, or someone craving fries at 2 a.m. But last Thursday was different. It was around 1:45 a.m. when the car pulled up to the drive-thru speaker. A black sedan, clean but nondescript, nothing unusual. I gave my usual greeting. "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" Silence. "Hello. Are you ready to order?" I asked again. I figured they were still deciding, or maybe their speaker wasn't working. It happens. But then I noticed something on the camera feed. The driver was just sitting there, completely still. No movement. Not even the glow of a phone screen. "Hello, can you hear me?" I tried one last time. Finally, the car rolled forward slowly, stopping at the payment window. Now, this is where things got weird. The man behind the wheel, if you could call him that, didn't say a word. He didn't roll down his window or acknowledge me at all. He just sat there, staring straight ahead. I tapped on the window, trying to get his attention. "Sir, do you want to place an order?" Nothing. His face was illuminated by the dim light from the drive-thru canopy. I could see him clearly now, bald, pale skin, and wearing a suit that looked slightly too big for him. His eyes were wide, unblinking. It was unnerving, to say the least. After a few seconds, I decided to move on. "If you're not ordering, I'm going to have to ask you to pull forward," I said, trying to sound professional. And he did. But instead of leaving, he stopped at the pickup window. I wasn't sure what to do. At this point, the car had been there for almost 5 minutes without placing an order. I radioed my manager, but he was out back dealing with a delivery. So, I went to the pickup window myself. "Sir, if you're not ordering, I need you to leave. We have other customers coming through." He slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a second I froze. There was something about his stare. It wasn't angry or confused. It was empty. And then he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not even a creepy one. It was like his face didn't know how to smile properly, and it was trying to mimic what he thought a smile should look like. I took a step back, feeling my stomach drop. "I'm calling security if you don't leave," I said, my voice shaking a little. As soon as I said it, he drove off. No squealing tires, no sudden acceleration, just a slow, deliberate roll out of the drive-thru and into the night. I thought that was the end of it. Weird, but manageable. But it wasn't. Around 3:15 a.m., the same car came back. This time, he didn't stop at the speaker. He went straight to the pickup window and just parked. I didn't approach him this time. Instead, I called my manager, who finally came inside from the delivery area. "What's going on?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "That guy's back. He didn't order, but he's just sitting there." My manager frowned and walked to the window. He waved at the driver, signaling him to leave. The man didn't respond. After about a minute, my manager had enough. He called the police while I stood there, watching the car, hoping it would just leave on its own. But it didn't. By the time the police arrived, the car was gone. No screeching tires, no engine sound. Just gone. The officers checked the security footage, but something was wrong with the cameras. The car was visible when it first arrived, but after that, nothing. It was like it had vanished frame by frame. I haven't seen the car since, but I still work the overnight shift. Every time I see headlights approach the drive-thru, I hold my breath, praying it's just another normal customer. Because if that man comes back, I don't know what I'll do. Working the overnight shift at a fast food drive-thru can get lonely. There aren't many customers between midnight and sunrise, so you start to recognize the regulars. The guy who orders fries at 1 a.m. like clockwork, the exhausted parents grabbing coffee before a long drive, and the occasional trucker passing through town. But then there are nights like this, nights that make you wonder why you ever took the job. It was just after 2 a.m. when he pulled up. A police cruiser, black and white, with flashing lights on top. I didn't think much of it at first. Cops stop by all the time for coffee or a quick snack. The guy rolled down his window, and I leaned out of the drive-thru to greet him. "Good evening, officer. What can I get for you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed me a piece of paper, just a plain, crumpled sheet torn from a notebook. On it, in sloppy handwriting, was a list of items: a burger, fries, a milkshake, and a coffee. "No charge," he said flatly. His voice was deep, with no emotion behind it. I hesitated. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out free food. You'll have to pay for your order. He didn't like that answer. The man leaned closer, and that's when I noticed something odd. His badge didn't look quite right. It was slightly off-center on his chest, and the lettering was smudged. His uniform, too, seemed a little baggy, like it didn't fit him properly. You sure about that? He asked, his tone icy. Policy says officers eat for free. You don't want to get in trouble for not following policy, do you? My stomach tightened. We didn't have any such policy, but his words made me second-guess myself. Let me check with my manager, I said, retreating from the window. I found my manager, Lisa, in the back, restocking supplies. There's a cop at the window asking for free food, I told her. He's being kind of pushy about it. Lisa frowned. We don't give free food to anyone, cop or not. Tell him to pay or leave. I nodded and went back to the window, trying to muster up some confidence. Sir, I checked with my manager, and we can't give out free food. You'll need to pay if you'd like to place an order. His eyes narrowed. For a moment, I thought he might argue, but instead he sat back in his seat and gave me a cold smile. You don't know who you're messing with, he said. I'll be back. And then he drove off. I tried to shake it off, telling myself he was just another entitled customer. But something about the interaction stuck with me. Why would a real cop demand free food? And why did his uniform seem off? About an hour later, I was outside taking out the trash when I saw headlights in the distance. The same cruiser pulled into the parking lot, but this time, it didn't stop at the drive-thru. Instead, it parked at the far end of the lot, facing the building. The man just sat there, his car idling. I pretended not to notice and hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. I told Lisa what was happening, and she immediately called the non-emergency police line. A dispatcher answered, and Lisa explained the situation. We've got someone claiming to be an officer parked in our lot, but something doesn't feel right, she said. The dispatcher's response sent a chill down my spine. We don't have any units in that area right now. Lisa hung up and told me to stay inside while we waited for real officers to arrive. The man was still in his car, watching us through the front windows. I could feel his gaze even from inside the building. When the police arrived about 15 minutes later, the cruiser was gone. They searched the lot and checked our security footage, but the camera outside was glitching, showing only static during the time he was there. The officers told us to be careful and report anything suspicious, but there wasn't much else they could do. I still work the overnight shift, but every time I see headlights pull into the lot, I get a little nervous. Who is that man? And what would have happened if I'd opened the door for him? I've seen my fair share of odd customers during the overnight shift, but this one stuck with me. It was a quiet Tuesday night, the kind where time feels like it's dragging. I'd just finished wiping down the counters when a car pulled up to the drive-thru. It was an old blue sedan, the kind that's seen better days. Welcome to Quick Bites. Can I take your order? I said, trying to sound chipper even though I was exhausted. There was a pause before a voice crackled through the speaker. Yeah. Can I get a cheeseburger? Just the burger. No fries. No drink. Of course. Anything else? Nope, that's it. I rang up the order and told them to pull around to the window. When the car rolled up, I got my first look at the driver, a man in his late 30s or early 40s, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He handed me a crumpled $5 bill without a word. I gave him his change and handed over the bag. Have a great night. He didn't respond, just drove off without even a nod. It wasn't unusual. Plenty of people are too tired or distracted to bother with pleasantries. I went back to cleaning, thinking that was the end of it. But 20 minutes later, the same car came back. This time, I recognized it immediately. Welcome, I said hesitantly. Can I take your order? The same voice came through the speaker. Yeah. Can I get a cheeseburger? Just the burger. No fries. No drink. I felt a little uneasy. Maybe he was hungry enough for two, I thought. I rang up the order again and waited for him at the window. When he pulled up, he handed me another crumpled $5 bill, identical to the first one. I handed over the bag and tried to make eye contact, but he kept his head low, the brim of his cap shadowing his face. He drove off again, and I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he really loved our cheeseburgers. But then, 30 minutes later, he came back. This time, my stomach dropped. I didn't even bother with the greeting. Sir, this is your third time ordering the same thing tonight, I said through the speaker. Is everything okay? There was a long pause before he replied. Cheeseburger. Just the burger. No fries. No drink. I didn't know what to do. My manager wasn't in that night, and I was the only one on shift. Reluctantly, I rang up the order and waited for him at the window. When he pulled up, I tried to smile, but my nerves were starting to get the best of me. "Are you sure everything's all right?" I asked as I handed him the bag. He didn't answer. This time, as he drove off, I noticed something in the back seat, a large duffel bag. It wasn't there the first 2 times, and for some reason, it sent a shiver down my spine. I decided that if he came back again, I'd call the police. Sure enough, 45 minutes later, the blue sedan pulled into the drive-thru for the 4th time. "Welcome," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Can I take your order?" "Cheeseburger. Just the burger. No fries. No drink." I walked away from the speaker and called the non-emergency police line. "There's a man who's come through our drive-thru 4 times tonight," I explained. "He's acting strange. The dispatcher said they'd send someone over," and I stalled by pretending the grill was backed up. "It'll be just a minute for your order, sir," I said, trying to sound calm. When the police arrived, they approached his car cautiously. The man didn't resist, but when they asked him to step out, he refused. Eventually, they convinced him to open the door. That's when they saw the duffel bag in the back seat. It was filled with cash. Thousands of dollars, neatly stacked and bound with rubber bands. Turns out, the man had just robbed a gas station up the road. He'd been looping through the drive-thru to avoid suspicion, hoping to blend in. The cops arrested him on the spot, and I spent the rest of my shift trying to shake off the adrenaline. I still think about that night sometimes. If he'd come back a 5th time, who knows what he might have done. I've dealt with plenty of rude customers in my time working the overnight shift, but this one was different. There was something about him that made my skin crawl. It was just after 1:30 a.m., and the drive-thru had been dead for about an hour. I was catching up on some cleaning when I heard the familiar ding signaling a car at the speaker. "Welcome. Can I take your order?" I said, forcing a cheerful tone. There was a long pause before a voice came through. "Yeah, I want a double cheeseburger. No pickles. No onions. And hurry it up." The voice was sharp, impatient, and dripping with irritation. "Of course, sir. Anything else?" "No," he snapped. "And I don't want to wait all night." I sighed and punched in the order. "That'll be $4.99. Please pull around." When the car came into view, I could already tell the guy was trouble. He was driving a beat-up red truck, and the headlights were so dim I could barely see the license plate. He rolled down his window, and the first thing I noticed was the smell, a mix of cigarettes and something metallic like old pennies. His face was scruffy, with a week's worth of stubble, and his eyes darted around like he was sizing up the place. I handed him the bag and tried to keep it professional. "Here you go, sir. Have a great night." Instead of driving off, he rummaged through the bag, muttering to himself. Then he glared up at me. I said no onions. I froze. I was positive I'd entered the order correctly, but I apologized anyway. "I'm so sorry, sir. Let me fix that for you." Before I could take the bag back, he threw it onto the counter. The burger tumbled out, smearing ketchup all over the window ledge. "Hurry it up," he barked, his voice louder now. "I don't have all night." I quickly remade the burger, my hands shaking as I wrapped it up and handed it to him. He snatched it from me without a word and sped off, his tires screeching as he left the lot. I thought that was the end of it. About 20 minutes later, I was restocking napkins when I heard the ding again. The red truck was back. "Welcome to Burger Zone," I said cautiously. "Can I take your order?" There was no response. "Hello." I tried again, leaning closer to the microphone. Nothing. I glanced at the security camera feed and saw the truck idling at the speaker. The driver's side window was rolled up, and the headlights were off. "Sir, if you're not ordering, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," I said, trying to sound firm. Still nothing. The truck sat there for another minute before it slowly pulled forward, stopping just outside the drive-thru window. I stepped back, my heart racing. The man was staring at me through the glass, his face partially hidden by the shadow of his truck's cab. He wasn't holding his burger this time. His hands were empty, resting on the steering wheel. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. He just sat there, staring. After what felt like an eternity, he rolled down his window and spoke. His voice was eerily calm now. "You should really learn how to do your job right." And then he drove off. I locked the doors after that and spent the rest of my shift watching the parking lot, half expecting him to come back. He never did. The next morning, I told my manager about the incident. She checked the security footage but said the camera aimed at the drive-thru had been acting up all night, showing only static. I still wonder what his deal was. Was he just another rude customer, or was there something more to him? Working the night shift at a 24-hour fast food joint, you get used to seeing the same faces. There are the truckers grabbing a quick bite, the partygoers looking for greasy food to soak up the alcohol, and the occasional night owl craving fries at 3 a.m. Then there was him, the guy in the black hoodie. He first showed up on a Wednesday night around 2 a.m. I remember because it was one of those painfully slow nights where I was counting the minutes until my shift ended. He walked up to the drive-thru window, which was unusual since most people use their cars. "Hey," he said, his voice low but clear. "Can I get a large coffee?" "Sure thing," I replied, punching it into the register. "That'll be $1.79. He handed me 2 crumpled dollar bills and waited quietly while I poured the coffee. When I gave it to him, he nodded and walked off into the night. Nothing strange, just another customer. But then he came back the next night. Same time, same order, same black hoodie. And the night after that. And the one after that. By the 5th night, I was curious. "You sure do like our coffee," I joked as I handed him the cup. He just smiled faintly, took the coffee, and walked away. It became routine. Every night at 2 a.m., he'd show up like clockwork, order a large coffee, and leave without saying much. I started calling him the coffee guy in my head. One night, I decided to ask him outright. "So, what brings you here every night? You work around here?" He paused, his hand halfway to the coffee cup. "Something like that," he said, then walked away. That's when I started noticing little things that didn't add up. For one, he always wore the same hoodie, even when it was unseasonably warm. And his hands, every time he handed me money, his hands were ice cold, like he'd been standing outside for hours. Then there was the fact that he never drove. He always walked, but I never saw where he came from or where he went after leaving. One night, curiosity got the better of me. After my shift ended, I decided to follow him. I waited until he was a good distance ahead before slipping out the side door. He walked down the main road for a while before turning onto a side street. I kept my distance, sticking to the shadows. But then, just as I turned the corner, he was gone. There was no one there, just an empty street lined with closed shops and parked cars. I looked around, but it was like he'd vanished into thin air. I didn't see him for the next 3 nights. I figured he'd finally moved on or found a different place to get his late-night coffee. But on the 4th night, he came back. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I handed him his coffee. He didn't say anything this time, just took the cup, nodded, and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. A few weeks later, I was talking to one of the older employees who'd been there for years. I mentioned the coffee guy, expecting her to laugh it off or tease me for being spooked. Instead, her face went pale. "That sounds like the guy from a few years ago," she said. "We used to have a regular who came in every night for coffee. Black hoodie, quiet, always walking. He stopped showing up one night, and a few days later, we heard he'd been hit by a car, right on that side street near here." I tried to laugh it off, but the way she looked at me made my stomach churn. I don't know who or what I'd been serving coffee to, but every time I work the night shift now, I can't help but glance at the clock when 2 a.m. rolls around, half expecting to see him walking up to the window again. Working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour fast food joint isn't glamorous, but I've gotten used to the routine. You take orders, serve food, and try not to think about how the fluorescent lights make everything feel just a little too surreal at 3 a.m. One night, though, something happened that broke that routine in the strangest way. It was a Wednesday just past 2:30 a.m. The drive-thru had been quiet for about an hour, and I was halfway through organizing the ketchup packets when the headset crackled to life. "Hi," a calm voice said. "Can I get a number 6 meal with a Coke?" I quickly dropped what I was doing and pressed the button. "Of course. Anything else?" "No, that's it." "All right, your total is $7.49. Please pull around." I looked at the camera feed, expecting to see headlights approaching the window. But there was nothing, just an empty lane stretching back into the dark parking lot. Must be a glitch, I thought, but I waited anyway. Sometimes people drive old cars without working headlights, and I didn't want to assume. A few minutes passed and no one showed up. "Hello," I said into the headset. "If you're still there, I didn't see you pull up. Are you coming to the window?" Silence. I replayed the order in my head, wondering if I'd imagined it. But the system had registered the sale. Number 6 meal with a Coke, $7.49. I even checked the order queue. There it was, plain as day, logged just a few minutes earlier. All right, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. I cleared the order from the system and went back to sorting the ketchup packets. Another hour passed with no customers, and I was starting to feel the lull of exhaustion when the headset crackled again. "Hi," the same calm voice said. "Can I get a number 6 meal with a Coke?" I froze. It was the exact same order, word for word. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please pull around." Once again, no car appeared on the camera feed. I waited for what felt like an eternity before grabbing the headset mic. "Hello? Are you there?" Nothing. I cleared the order again and told myself it had to be a technical issue. Maybe someone was pranking us using a Bluetooth device or a radio signal. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that crept up my spine every time I looked at the drive-through lane. The shift dragged on, and I was counting down the minutes until my coworker came to relieve me. Just as I was about to clock out, the headset crackled one last time. "Hi," the voice said. "Can I get a number 6 meal with a Coke?" This time, I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at the camera feed, waiting to see if anyone would appear. When the lane stayed empty, I pressed the mic button and said, "If this is a joke, it's not funny. Either come to the window or stop messing with me." There was a long pause before the voice replied, soft and almost amused. "I'm already here." My heart sank. I looked up at the drive-through window, but there was no one there. I checked the cameras again, scanning every angle of the lot. It was completely empty. When my coworker finally arrived, I didn't say much about what had happened. I just clocked out and went home, hoping that maybe I was just overtired or imagining things. But the next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Out of curiosity, I pulled up the logs for the drive-through orders. Sure enough, there were 3 separate entries for the same order. Number 6 meal with a Coke. What I can't explain is why the timestamps didn't match up with when I'd heard the voice. One was from 2:30 a.m., fine. But the others? One was from exactly a year ago, and the other was dated 3 years earlier to the day. I don't know who or what keeps ordering that number 6 meal, but I hope I never hear that voice again. It was nearing the end of my shift, and it had been one of those uneventful nights. The kind where everything just drags on, and you start to question your life choices. The usual late-night customers had come and gone, and it was just me in the drive-thru, mindlessly wiping down the counters and keeping myself awake. It was around 3:30 a.m. when the headset crackled to life. "Hi, I'd like to get a Big Mac, a large fries, and a Sprite," the voice said, calm and steady, almost too calm. I glanced at the drive-thru camera. The lane was empty. No headlights, no sign of a car. I thought I had misheard. Maybe they were parked in the shadows or waiting further down the lane. I pressed the button, trying to sound professional, but something in my gut told me something was off. Sir, I don't see anyone in the lane. Are you sure you're at the window?" For a moment, there was silence, and then the voice came back, still too calm, like it didn't even faze them that I couldn't see them. "Yes, I'm at the window. Just a Big Mac, large fries, and a Sprite, please." I froze. There was no way anyone was at the window. I quickly checked the security cameras. Nothing. The entire parking lot was dark, and the drive-through lane was as empty as it had been for the past half hour. I swallowed hard. Something wasn't right. I decided to go ahead and prepare the order. Maybe it was a prank, or maybe they were hiding their car behind the building. Either way, the system had logged the order. I made the Big Mac and fries, double-checking everything. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I had been working the late shifts for months, but this felt different, unsettling. Once I finished, I went to the window to call out to the customer. The lane was still empty. No car. No headlights. I felt my heart start to race as I spoke into the mic. "Your total is $7.79. Please pull forward to the window." Silence. I waited, staring out the window into the dark lot. There was no sound, no movement. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerators behind me. After a few moments, the voice crackled through again. "I'll be there soon." I stood frozen, staring out into the empty night, trying to make sense of what was happening. I had worked many late shifts, but I'd never experienced anything like this. The seconds felt like hours. I looked at the clock. It was now 3:45 a.m. I checked the cameras again. Still nothing. Suddenly, the voice came again. I'll pick it up tomorrow. My stomach dropped. I didn't know how to react. I couldn't explain it. Was this a prank? A glitch? Some bizarre mistake? I waited until my shift ended, but there was no sign of the customer. No car pulled up, and no one came to claim the order. The next morning, when I checked the system, I found the order still in the system. A Big Mac, large fries, and a Sprite still pending. But there was something odd. The customer's name was blank. I tried to forget about it, but every time I worked that shift, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the dark, quiet drive-thru. And every time I looked out the window, I half expected to see someone standing there, waiting to pick up an order that seemed to have come from nowhere.